what I plan to do today is to share some of the things that we are doing at AUT, and and some of the new projects that we are starting, mainly regarding to how do we map the development of academic literacies. And so the session today will be a little bit about their sharing a little bit of what we are doing at the moment, and um, and and of course I would love to hear your feedback, and I would love to pick your brains as well, because what we're doing now, it's fairly recent. We're just doing some baby steps. I'm sure that some of you are perhaps doing things much more advanced than this, but we're starting in rather slowly, and in hearing your ideas would be really interesting. So we have an hour together. Feel free to. I'll be monitoring the chat box. I'll try to get back to you and to uh, all all of you as you put some questions in. So feel free to don't feel that you need to wait until the end. So feel free to start writing and asking questions or comments, and I will try to get back to you through the session. So I don't have many slides. We're talking, I think it's like 10 or something for an hour, or 15, something like that. For an hour, it would be, I think, more than sufficient, so allowing us more of a discussion rather than a presentation, because I'm really fond of a discussion. Obviously, you've realized that English is not my first language, so I do apologize right now if I say, if I misuse the language of Shakespeare. By the way, do you hear me okay? So I know that you see me okay. I see the microphone working. Is the sound sufficiently yeah, loud and clear? In fantastic. Okay, so I have a lot of feedback. Your Kiwi accent. Okay, thanks, Suzanne, and Brownman and Barbara and everyone who joined in. Okay, so let's start. And so today we're talking about mapping development of academic literacy. So hopefully what I'll try to do today is to provide you a little bit of an introduction. What do I mean when I talk about academic literacies? What's what's the understanding that we're using at IUT? A little bit of the theoretical framework that we're using for this fairly recent piece of work, a little bit of research that we've done, and sharing with you some of the research designs and findings, a little bit of the outcomes. So how are we using what we found to map the academic literacies development, and of course audience feedback and Q&A. But feel free to start sharing thoughts and ideas as I go, or if anything is not clear, it's better that we just unpack that, because we do have a little bit of time. So academic literacies. Well, I guess my first point here is that, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this, it's about the concept of literacies rather than literacy. So we understand this from a little bit of a broader context, as all the tools that students need to be successful at university, more than just the pure reading and writing. So, and we see these academic literacies as a base, or the support where all the content knowledge develops through, that supports all the content knowledge. And I know that this kind of, I just like to put this in an image, but this kind of represents how do we see the role of academic literacies as something that supports the development of all the content knowledge, which is usually delivered throughout papers. But more than that, is academic literacies is also, or the skills that you develop in your when we develop academic literacies, also supports lifelong learning. So these are skills that are not, when we talk about research, or when we talk about academic literacies, or numeracy as a literacy, for example, we're talking about skills that not only support the development of students' content knowledge, but also support lifelong learning. These are skills that are going to be used by um, uh, by all of us throughout our lives. And this kind of speaks to the importance of academic literacies. And the reason why I'm kind of highlighting these at this stage, it's because most of the university, higher, tertiary education um, looks with far more emphasis to content knowledge. And I'm not disregarding the importance of content knowledge, of course, but what I'm making a case for is what I'm doing is making a case for academic literacies, which is equally important and supports the development of content knowledge, and continues as well to support our lifelong learning. So in another way, what we would also like to highlight is that, well, okay, well, we do have, let's just find here the mouse. Okay, there it is. So we do have academic literacy and content knowledge, and this is kind of shows how, and this is just a graphical picture. This so far has no research against it, but what we're trying to say here is that, let me see if I can find some sort of a pin. The development of academic literacies, the level it develops throughout our lives and our programs, as so does content knowledge. So it's not just a sort of skill that we learn that skill and that will keep us going for the rest of our lives. We also develop the depth and breadth of academic literacies. That we develop the level of skill that we use throughout a program, and content knowledge, of course, will also develop with it. But so what are academic literacies? So what actually are we really talking about? Well, I tried here to, because this is not the focus of the definition of academic literacy is not a focus of this presentation. So I've just made refuge at AUT's definition, because that's what we work with at AUT. So what AUT considers as academic literacies is information literacy. This is kind of how it's organized for us. It talks about information literacy, which includes things like research or critical thinking, digital literacy, the using of digital technology, numeracy as a literacy, statistical literacy, and language proficiency. And here it's a very particular case for AUT, because when we talk about, and it's within the New Zealand framework, when we talk about language proficiency, we're talking about not only English, but Te Reo Māori, as the two official languages of Aotearoa or New Zealand. So these are the broad areas that we tend to explore and to develop when we discuss this at AUT. However, when I looked at this initially, it was really easy to understand. Okay, yeah, information literacy, that's fine. Digital literacy, that's fine. Numeracy, statistical literacy, yeah, I understand that. Thank you very much, Don. There are 3 official languages in New Zealand. You're quite right. There's New Zealand Sign Language as well. And I think that's a very good point, because we tend to focus on English more these days. I reckon in Te Reo, but I don't think we have given within this context of academic literacy sufficiently importance to New Zealand Sign Language. So I think that's a very, very good point that you've raised on. Thank you very much for that. And perhaps I will need to rethink how do we include New Zealand Sign Language as a language, as the development of academic literacies in a language proficiency sphere. So thank you very much, Don. That's a really, really good comment. But coming back, when we talk about language proficiency, English and Te Reo, and the majority perhaps looking at English language, I found that to be short, because when we talk about language proficiency, we're talking about someone who's able to communicate in English. Well, a native speaker, by definition, would have ticked that box, but that's actually not true. Well, of course, a native speaker would tick the box of language proficiency, hopefully, or at least far better than me. But when we're talking about language proficiency here, we're talking about the ability to use that language skill towards a higher or tertiary educational context. So if that would suffice, if language proficiency would suffice, then we would not, we would have assumed that all native speakers would be able to successfully use the language at university. However, I think most of our experience as educators, we know that that doesn't happen very often. So we thought about, okay, so when we talk about language proficiency, what are we actually talking about? Are we just talking about the ability to speak in a specific language? And we thought, well, actually, no, it needs to be a little bit more than that, because when you use the language, you need to be mindful of disciplines, genres, or registers like the feel, the tenor, the mode. So we use systemic functional linguistics, the Halliday's model, which I'm hoping that you might be familiar with, to say, well, it's actually more than just using the language. It's using the language appropriately within a tertiary or university or higher education context. So it's about understanding not just the ability to speak the language, but also to use it in an appropriate way. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because it opens up the possibilities of thinking about the usage of a language for university or tertiary or university or higher education or tertiary system in that context. Now I'm using university, higher education, tertiary sector interchangeably, by the way, just acknowledging that, for example, here in New Zealand we talk about tertiary education, whereas for example in the UK or Canada, I'm assuming that you would use higher education, but we're talking about the same thing. So just trying to cater for different audiences here. So we've discussed about what are academic literacies, and how do we develop those? How do we incorporate those in a macro sense at university? So what are the current approaches for curriculum design? So how do we think about those? So I have Jenny making a question. Are you talking about shared discourses that are treated, shared, that build meaning between people who are opening at the same playing time frame, etc., thereby making meaning together in between? Well, I think so. Halliday's model of systemic functional linguistics talks also about the shared meaning and the need that shared meaning is understood in a way, because it's but for me the most what I take, not being a linguistic myself, what I take from that model is that uh, the need to reflect of the usage of that the usage of language goes beyond the proficiency of speaking it, but it needs to be adjusted to a specific genre, in a discipline, for example, or a specific register or tone, um, which is appropriate to a tertiary or a higher education context. So yes, Jenny, I am talking a little bit of that, but but the reason why we used Halliday's model is to allowing us to reflect that the usage of English language or of the usage of language goes beyond just the mere proficiency in speaking. It's about being aware that people build meanings, builds, share discourses or specific ways of interacting which are appropriate to the sector. And it also explains, well, or not explains, but helps us reflect something that we inherently know, that, for example, the genre in art is substantially different from the genre in philosophy or in law. Um, so, and the tone that it's used as well, and the structure. So, uh, allowing, bringing Halliday for me, and again, not being a linguistic myself, um, allows to have a framework to reflect on these differences in communication that we need to be aware of as educators as well. I hope that's kind of um, and I see that I hope that that's kind of provided some idea from where we're using it. I see that Dawn is also typing a little bit, so when I see okay, when there's another question, I'll come back to it. So this first part was about reflecting about what are academic literacies, but and I would like to reflect as well is how do we design our curriculum? What are the current approaches? Well, currently, and what we see happening throughout the tertiary or higher education sector is a discipline-based curriculum design. So we think about the qualification, we think about programs, we think about a series of disciplines or papers that are aligned or more or less with more or less structure, depending on how flexible the curriculum is. But it's mainly focused on disciplines. And Don just put here a question. What about the issues of colonizing through language appropriation, e.g. the term ACO in the New Zealand school curriculum document is defined in a way that may be different than its use in cultural context? Then the non-Maori staff may assess Maori students' understanding of them. Of course, and this unpacks a lot of issues, Don, and thank you very much for your comment. I think it's really insightful. And there is when we talk about the usage of language and te reo and the appropriation and of some of these concepts across languages do raise some reflection points. So I think that's a very interesting insight. But coming back, and I think that deserves also some further reflection. But coming back here to the current approaches of what we are doing here with, or what we usually do with curriculum design, we're just looking at it from a discipline base. So if you remember a few slides back, we talked about academic literacies developing as content knowledge develops as well. But current approaches to curriculum design are mainly discipline focused and discipline based. So mainly focus on content knowledge and in somehow, and with all due respect to different approaches, of course, but somehow not focusing as much in the development of academic literacies. So how do we do that? Well, oh, and I just seen a typo there. Oh my God. my apologies for for that. So we think about academic literacies, and we usually tend to treat it more or less separately. Some schools will be different than others, and perhaps with a more focus. But we tend to see that, okay, so that's that most of curriculum science is just thinking about what these different disciplines are there being developed in common. Now, what Robin and Quentin, which is McWilliams and Allen, and this is for previous research from IAT, realized and published about it was, well, actually the development, the embedded model of developing academic literacy is much more efficient than or it's really important and it's really efficient when we talk about developing these skills in a contextualized manner. And this is why at IUT we are doing a lot of development of embedding these skills within programs. But this raises a question: how do we do that? How do we? Well, because it's when you look at a paper base, it's fairly straightforward. So you look at a paper, you look at the assessments in a specific paper or discipline, and you tailor the development of academic literacies at that paper, and that's quite pretty much straightforward. However, how do we do that from a program perspective? How do we make sure that we are actually staircasing and developing those skills throughout a program? How are we doing that? And this is kind of one of the things that started that we started reflecting upon and querying and how we're doing this. So we also thought about interval learning, and this is I've now completely changed subjects just to share, and I'll try to be brief here. Just realized that I speak a lot and 23 minutes has gone by, so my apologies. I'll try to, because I really wanted to give more time for discussion, so I'll try to to put my foot on the accelerator. And I've just suddenly made a turn. This is just sharing with you just one point, and I'll bringing them back, and I'll hopefully in the end all these different ideas will be joined together. And what I wanted to talk to you as well was the notion of interval learning. Now, we came across this by reading Bjork, and by the way, Bjork, not the singer, Bjork, the author, and Bjork as well. And they talk about difference between spaced and interval learning, and it was really insightful reading about Bjork's research, because in some way supported the work that we're developing at IUT. What have they done? Well, they've actually shown that a higher effectiveness of interval learning as in comparison with blocked learning. And I'll just go, I'll just advance one slide. What they've done, and they've done this several times, and I'll come back to the previous slide in a moment. They've in one of the researches, they've tried to talk about, they tried to develop it was about knowing paintings and their authors, so and the history of art. So they've used it in a history of art context. So and they've got two groups of people. In one of them, they've given a block, a course, you know, kind of everything together in a single block, and everything they needed to know about the paintings and their authors. And with another group, similar, they've done exactly the same content, but in an intervaled way, meaning not specifically structured time-wise, with more spaced, smaller bits of information, and not just in a block course, so kind of spaced through time. And they've asked participants, what did they feel about it? Now, they've asked their own how did they rate themselves? What was more comfortable, and how did you learn best right after the course? And they actually measured as well. Well, this with the judge performance, so that's the self-awareness, the self assessment, and they've also looked at the real assessment. So interestingly enough, the majority of participants self-assessed, saying, "Oh, I love block learning. That was really the best for me. I really learned a lot. So yeah, that's what works for me." And that's would be expected. You get everything in a single pack. You get everything in your brain. Works fine. Fantastic. No worries. However, what was really interesting was that their actual performance was by far higher on so because they've made a test a few weeks down the track. The actual performance was by far higher in the interval learning group. So although participants thought, well, I've learned much more um, by doing the block course, a few months down the track, or a few weeks in this case down the track, the amount of information retained or processed and used in was far better in the interval group. Now, why is that? And this may speak, and I'm now coming back. Okay, so Don has just pondering about whether we are learning advisors think works for students might be different from what actually works for students. Yeah, that's quite right, Don. So we sometimes think about block and we'll just let students know everything that they need in a block course, and they'll be fully prepared for the rest of their lives. And I don't know about other institutions, but these thought process, what we realize is that this has an impact on academic literacies papers. There are, at least at IUT, some academic literacy papers, papers that are usually first year to try to give students the whole set of skills that they would need to be successful for the rest of their program. But what we see as learning advisors is that despite the fact that students have taken those papers in year 2 or year 3, they still sometimes don't know how to use those skills in following papers. And this might, I'm not saying that this is the explanation, but this might explain why these things happen, because we would have assumed from a purely curriculum design perspective that well, they ticked the box, they were successful in that course, therefore students would know how to reference and to critical think throughout the whole program. And what we see, that's not the case. Now, a very interesting conversation is happening here about so Don says it's just pondering wherever learning advisory we think works for students might be different from what actually works for them, and that's quite a very good point. Suzanne replied back saying, well, that sometimes students themselves don't know what they don't know, and that's usually happens a lot with first year students. And Fiona says that we get time to research and act on the research, which is really interesting. And Don comes back and says, learning advisors are not research active at Waikato. So yeah, and I think that in most of at least in New Zealand, most of learning advisors are not research active as well. But fortunately enough, at IUT, we do have the space. Although we're not formally research active, we tend to have these opportunities. Can we also? Oh, okay, fantastic. So thanks, Susanna. I'm just trying to, if there is, that's really good. But if there's any, I'm just trying to monitor it to see if there's any questions that I can speak to as well. Okay, So this talked about what interval learning is, and what it started to do for us was, okay, so perhaps doing embedded, ongoing. So this is how it links back to the development of academic literacies. Perhaps doing embedded, ongoing throughout the curriculum development of academic literacies might be more effective than just doing a first-year block course. Now, I have nothing, by the way, I have nothing against a first-year block course of academic literacies. I think they're really important. They do have a space, but they might, uh, um, but they might, in a way, but this interval learning theory from Bjork might explain why sometimes they are not so successfully. So another point is that, and of course this is just, I'm just doing this en passant, in passing, which is Biggs, and Biggs is big, and it's still pretty much present today when we talk about curriculum design. He talks about a very simple thing that we often forget. He talks about aligning of outcomes, activities, and assessments. And when we do curriculum design, we think about, well, okay, what are the outcomes, or the activities, and the assessments, that we put it all together. But again, most of the application of Biggs' theory, it's been more from a discipline-based approach rather than academic literacies approach. And what we've signaled is to say, well, okay, however, yeah, we do agree with this that there should be an alignment between outcomes, activities, and assessments. But this is not limited to content knowledge or to discipline bias. This is also applicable when we talk about the development of academic literacies and think about what are the academic literacies that students need to master by the end of a specific program. What activities do we do, and how do we incorporate those in assessments? So, and that brings another point of reflection to the development of academic literacies. So, these three, the notion of academic literacies, the notion of interval learning versus block learning, and the notion of alignment between outcomes, activities, and assessments are the base of this research we started to do. So we started to think, okay, we started to do this with the Bachelor of Sports and Recreation, and we're now doing it with other programs at AUT. We started to think, okay, we have the graduate profile, and most of us will have those for our programs, and hopefully the graduate profile are the set of skills that students would require to be successful in a specific job. So, and we think about what are the discipline skills that students need to achieve, but why not also thinking about what are the academic literacies that students need to support the development of their content knowledge? So we started looking at the graduate profile in a different manner, saying, yes, students do need these content knowledge, these discipline-based knowledge skills, but in order to achieve them, and because we've seen before that academic literacies are the base that supports the development of content knowledge, what are the academic literacies, skills that students need? So what have we done? And this is the previous research that we've done together with the Bachelor of Sports and Rec. So, and I'll just start drawing here let me see if this mouse works here or not. Okay, I'm using, so what have we started to do? So firstly, here, what we've done, and I'll show you here in a moment this thing kind of more working. We looked at, well, what's the Bachelor of Sports and Rec graduate profile? Let's think about, well, what are the outcomes of that specific program? Then, and this was a really loose discussion. We discussed with, and this was, by the way, a joint 6 months program project with the Bachelor of Sports and Rec, because it involved a lot of discussion with with the whole faculty, with all the lecturers of this program. We thought about, okay, so to develop that profile and being aware that academic literacies are the base, so what are the other skills that students would need to be successful? And we started mapping some of these skills here, like reading skills and grammar and paragraphing and referencing and paraphrasing and critical thinking. So we started to and that's not a definitive list, but that's a starting point. And we started to look at what are the skills that students need to achieve that graduate profile. And then we looked at first year, second year, and third year core papers. What are the core papers that students are going to be on that journey? Now, and here we could have done this differently. I reckon we could have looked at every single paper, but then we might have not have enough resources to support all of those papers, making sure that all students actually reached those outcomes. So what we started, we focused, and this is kind of perhaps a limitation because we focused mainly on first year core papers. But I just might pause here just also to share with you another reason why. Is because at IUTs, the student learning has a specific set of staff. We were not too many, and because we are expanding our embedded, we needed to do that in a way that we would not be exhausted in the usage of our resources. And more than that, so that's one variable, and another variable is that, and this is perhaps one of the things that come behind the scenes that are not actually 100% mentioned in the research, but this is perhaps an behind the scenes insight. What we were also seeing at student within our unit was that potentially, if we were not looking at when we started doing embedding, we started with more focus on embedding perhaps 2 or 3 years ago. We started to realize that we needed to do that in a very careful way, because if we would not have the program view of what we were doing in a specific program, potentially we could have say that a lecture in a first year, second semester lecture would ask us to do, oh, can you please help me with the assignment? We need you to do essay writing. We would just go there and do an essay writing embedded workshop. That would be fine. But the next semester, the following semester, another lecturer from the second year would ask us, oh, but I also need essay writing. So potentially it could happen that 2 lecturers from 2 different papers from 2 different years would have asked us to do the same thing, but the students were the same because it just moved on from year 1 to year 2. So we're not acknowledging where students were at, their knowledge. So and this also allowed us to understand where they are in that journey. So and then we're not saying, well, we won't do essay writing. Well, what we will say is something like, but those students already had this workshop. Let's kind of refresh that and move forward and provide even further insights. So this is just kind of a little bit of the behind the scenes also why. So coming back here, we look at first, second, and third year core papers, and for each one of these core papers, and for example here I'm looking at managing sports and recreation. We said, well, this is a great paper for us to develop reading skills, grammar, referencing, paragraphing, and the whole essay writing. So instead of just doing a standalone essay writing workshops for these students, we said, well, let's do that embedded in this paper, and then, for example, move on in year 2 to deepening research skills and critical thinking. And I know that critical thinking should be there since the start. We're talking about a more advanced um, skill set. And why is that as well? Because the program leader and the third year lecturers of sports and rec, when they were realizing that when students were coming to their third year and doing co-op papers, they would need to do a literature review. And that also is a reason why we started mapping this, because sometimes we focus too much on our first years and developing the academic literacies for our first years, and then we forget that we should be able to continue developing those skills. So we think about, okay, what about the third years, and they need to do a literature review. So we were seeing, for example, here in their second years, we're seeing, well, there's a desert here. So there's a lot of support wrapped around first years then in their journey. Then there's a desert. And then they need to do a literature review in their third year. Of course, they will not be able to do it because they haven't done it before. So we started negotiating, for example, okay, so we'll do in their first semester a little bit developing further, oh, sorry, it's a lot of drawing. Developing a little bit more their research skills and critical thinking in semester one of their second year. They will attempt to do a smaller literature review in their semester two, year two, and then hopefully when they reach their third year for their co-op, at least they've done it before, and it will be a staircasing opportunity. So, and this is kind of how we started looking at this development from a program approach. So, what are we doing? So, in a nutshell, we're looking at the graduate profile and doing the skills assessment. So this is what when we're talking about supporting the development of a whole program, we look at graduate profile, skills assessments, where are the academics literacy skills that students need to be successful. So we look at core papers then, what are the core papers that program specifically has. We look at the assessments of those core papers, and we start to look at the literacies development throughout that program, and what that gives us is a clear vision. A more recent project, and I won't talk about that. For example, realized that there was a huge gap in the development of literacies in a second year as well. So we looked at it for another bachelor, and that was when we've unpacked that together with the program leader and with faculty, it was really mind-blowing. Oh yes, that explains why students come here and they don't know, because we haven't looked at it from a program perspective. So Don asks, are student learning staff involved in teaching the core papers, or is your involvement behind the scenes advising staff in the program? Both. And thank you very much for that question, Don. So it's what we do. We start having the notion of teaching teams. So we work with staff and we support staff in that development as well. So we do it by doing embedded. We also go to the classroom and unpack that based on the upcoming assessment that they will have, the students will have. So, and therefore contextualizing. So it's actually both. We actually are also in the classroom, and we also work behind the scenes with faculty as well. So it's kind of it's a joint venture. We work together. So in an ideal world, this so what we thought about is that, well, we have year one, year two, year three, and things would move on smoothly. But so coming back to Suzanne, when you are in the classroom, is the class tutor there too? Yes, which we all thank you very much, Suzanne. It's a very good point. Yes, we try to that the tutor or the lecturer is there as well, because it's a joint venture. It's not just our own responsibility. It's a joint response, and that's why we talked about teaching teams. So it is a joint responsibility. So what's what organically arises is that lecturers tend to be more focused on their content knowledge, which they are the experts, and we wouldn't want to go there anyway. And on those teaching teams, we would be the ones, the experts on academic literacies development. So, and this is why we work together. And yes, the tutors or the lecturers would naturally be there, even because it's how we work together. So, in an ideal world, things would be just smoothly, but the fact is that they're not. So, what we thought about is that, well, although this would be kind of this idea, kind of, yeah, fantastic, the reality that it's not. So what we thought about, okay, so let's develop the first year skills. Then when students go to a next step, let's do some assessments. Let's look at where students are at in their development of skills. And students who need further development, we would provide specific support for them, and so that they could be able to join the development of their second year skills. And the same thing occurs on their third year. There's an initial assessment or a diagnostic assessment in the beginning, and then the third year skills are developed. And students who would need a little bit of support throughout that development, we would do that just for them. And here we used MESAs as a diagnostic skill. And if you're in Sydney, you might have heard of this, and because this was developed by the University of Sydney, and we used as a framework to use as a diagnostic test to look at how do we develop where students are at. And I'm just mindful of time, so I'm just kind of going forward a little bit faster, because I do want to leave a little bit of time for question and answer. And what you see here is, if you know MESAs, the 5 criteria that MESAs would have, and what can students do about developing those skills. So it's also about giving students a possibility of moving forward. And our way forward these days is to expand a little more our program approach. So in student learning, we have working with faculty, we have just an assessment approach, we have a paper approach, and we have a program approach. And we are more and more focused on developing our program approach and working with faculty, mapping out the development of academic literacies. And what we're trying to share with you today is just a framework of how we are doing that. And I was actually I bring some Tideo expression, but I was actually born in Africa, so I also brought an African saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and that's the approach we have, or we're trying to foster at IUT, that it's a joint venture between faculty and learning advisors, that we are able to map the development of academic literacies. So to be fair, this quite didn't go according to plan, because I was planning to just speak a little bit less than what I've did, but I kind of got enthusiastic and passionate, so my apologies for that. But I think we still have 10 minutes to. So my idea was just to share with you the approach we're doing at a program level, more than just what we do as a normal embedded, and I would, leave the rest of the time, if you have, I know it's just 10 minutes, if you have any questions, any ideas, any thoughts, I'm more than happy to send you these materials. Some of the things that we've worked here, and I'm just coming back, for example, for here we use a specific software. I didn't talk about that. We use a specific software called Trello that allows us to work collaboratively. But anyway, just sharing with you some of these thoughts and ideas. So thank you very much for your thoughts, Adon. We like your enthusiasm. Thank you very much. It's almost 6 o'clock in the morning now. I'm waking up. So yeah. The software is called Trello, and um, Trello, and it's Trello.com. It's not a software developed. It's a free software. It's not developed for curriculum design. It's used for project management, and it's used mainly if you're using an agile approach to project management, which we are doing in an unconscious way. It's not formally an agile project management, but that's why we use this as a this is why we use this. So Suzanne says that it looks like we've published the research. Yeah, the software is free, by the way. The Trello is free. Well, at least the version we're using is free. Some of the research some of the research about embedding is here, and I'm happy to send you the references as well. So this is about the importance of embedding academic literacies. And the other one here was presented at Atlans, is how we started at Atlans conference in 2014. It's how we've mapped the development of the BSR. Now this BSR development, we're going to with Jennifer Nicolai and Simon Waters and myself, and Jennifer and Simon. So Nikolai and Walters, they are lecturers from sports and recreation, and we've presented that at Atlans, and we're finalizing this to be published at Atlans Journal. So watch that space as well. So Trello, how much does this cost? And Michael is a Trello fan. I'm seeing it's free, it's flexible. It's a really nice way of organizing things. You can use Trello for your personal life or for whatever you want. It's a project management software. You can work collaboratively with different people. And it allows you to. What I like about Trello is the collaboration approach. Is the ability to drill in and then also zoom out and see the bird's eye view and allow you also to look at the detail. So you have cards that you can then on the cards. I didn't show you but. For example, what allows you is here for example, for each core paper, this is a core paper here, you have like a file attached to it, which is the paper descriptor with all the assessments, so you can have a little bit more of insight. So it's a very interesting and useful tool.